into today's training, which is mindfulness, gratitude, and social support. We're just shoving the three other non-negotiables. Oops. These other three, let me see. I didn't put this slide in this part, so now it's probably lost forever. Oh my goodness. The other three, we've already done sleep, nutrition, exercise. Now we're going to pack mindfulness, gratitude, and social support into one call, because that's just how it worked out. And it doesn't make them any less important, because to be honest, they're probably more important for most of us, because we tend to think of sleep, nutrition, exercise as very physical, right? And we know our bodies need to be in top shape. So most high achievers, entrepreneurs, they know these things, they focus on these things, and they get them pretty dialed in. Sometimes mindfulness, gratitude, social support, these things don't even cross our minds. Okay, so they're important, incredibly important for many reasons, not just our mental health, but also our physical health. All right, so we're going to go into mindfulness as the ultimate state of being, gratitude and how it actually can expand happiness, and our physical and mental need for social support. All right, so starting off with mindfulness, we call it the ultimate state of being, and it might sound hyperbolic to say that, but it really is not. It really is the ultimate state of, human consciousness, where we are in the moment and completely aware of all the things going on around us. All right, most of us, most of the time, are just lost in mental activities, lost in, ruminating about the past, or, anxious or worrying about the future, right? And that tends to cause a lot of suffering in our lives. But the act of being mindful, or the state of being mindful, is really an enjoyable experience where we're in the present moment and we are able to see things as they come in. And as Viktor Frankl said in his book, A Man's Search for Meaning, the mindfulness state is our ability to live in the gap between stimulus and response. When we have a stimulus that comes in to our nervous system, right? Oftentimes our survival brain will immediately react to it, almost like a reflex. And if you've ever been like angry at someone and just exploded on them, you know what I'm talking about. The mindfulness trait is the ability to stay, okay, stimulus happened, right? But I'm gonna choose my response. I can live in this little gap, so I can actually make a choice on how I want to respond to this. So it's incredibly important and powerful state. And this is kind of how it goes in a chronological order. Like, the practice of mindfulness allows us to kind of live in that gap, allows us to refocus our attention, okay? And then that practice then becomes a state of mindfulness. When we are in a state of mindfulness, we are aware of the things as they come into our conscious awareness, and we can choose that response. After we practice that for a while, and that becomes kind of a state that we can enter into more often, then it becomes a trait. Then we have the trait of mindfulness, where we are oftentimes kind of living in that. When states become traits, right, especially in mindfulness context, then we go from absorption in mental activities, where we're absorbed in the activity and like whatever comes to it, we're a little bit more reactive. We can actually separate away from that and become what, a lot of spiritual communities, as they refer to mindfulness, you become the witness or the observer of what's going on in our minds. And then we have awareness of the mental activities. Instead of being totally absorbed in them, kind of lost in the rough and tumble of thoughts as they just come and come and go and come and go, then we just become aware of them. We can see them as they come and we can just let them go. So what does that mean for us? Well, number one, it means that we're going to be a lot better at regulating our nervous system when we are practicing more mindfulness. Okay. And a lot of that comes from like that interoceptive system that we were talking about a little bit last week. And this is a slide from one of our first calls around neurotraining, right? We have all of these inputs coming from external and then our internal environment, or interoception. The practice of being mindful really increases our interoceptive awareness and over time, the accuracy of what's going on in the body. The kind of the default practice for mindfulness training, meditation, is a focused awareness on the breathing. That's a really good interoceptive input where we can grow in awareness and accuracy by just paying attention to our breathing. So the more we practice this, the better we get at this interoceptive awareness and accuracy, the better our brain function gets. I mean, that's in just one part of the brain. But I mean, if you guys have looked into mindfulness or meditation at all, you'll know that the benefits of meditation or just mindfulness in general are incredible. Like I don't know of any other intervention or modality that can increase performance, increase physical health, mental health, social intelligence, emotional intelligence, regular intelligence, all the different kinds of intelligence, and just overall brain function better than a mindfulness practice. There's numerous books out there on the subject. Like you can throw a stick and you'll find a benefit to mindfulness training. So on the one hand, more awareness and better regulation of our nervous system is a really big benefit of mindfulness training. The other one is mitigating the dark side of flow. And we haven't talked about the dark side of flow much, but there is a negative side to flow states. Okay? It can be very addictive, right? That really good feeling of euphoria and just that constant drive intrinsically to find flow states can be negative depending on, what we're chasing, right? When we're in flow state, our tolerance for risk goes way up. So we take way more risks, which is really important because we got to be out of our comfort zone to find flow, right? Julie's taking a risk by writing a screenplay that she's never done before and meeting with a producer that could easily reject her. That's a risk. But when we're in flow, we take those risks because we feel so good and we feel very confident in our abilities and we're writing like a friggin' rock star, right? And so the tolerance for risk can go up, and that's a very good thing because it allows us to go out there, put ourselves out there and chase our dreams. But it can be negative, and I'm sure we can all imagine how, right? We used to call people adrenaline junkies that chase these action adventure sports like rock climbing and freestyle skiing and kiteboarding, whatever else. There's lots of risky sports out there. And these guys and gals that were chasing those things, we used to call them adrenaline junkies because, you get that adrenaline rush or whatever, but that's actually not true. They're actually flow junkies. They're chasing the state of flow, which is not a highly adrenalized state, and it should not be, because too much adrenaline means anxiety and, you kind of freeze up. You can freeze up, or it just doesn't function as well. That's why flow junkie is better term, because there's a lot of other neurochemicals that are going on that make you feel even better. Like adrenaline's not that great of a feeling, but dopamine is, anandamide is, serotonin is, like these endorphins These are really good feelings, and we chase that. But some people don't know how to find flow unless they're using risk as their trigger. And we adapt to anything. So once we do risky behaviors for a while, they become not that risky, right? They don't get the same effects. So we got to, punch it up a notch and do something riskier and keep going. So that can be, maladaptive. Okay. We also have this sense of control in flow that might trick us sometimes. We might try something that's just a little bit too far outside of our current skill level, and we might fail at it. You can fall, you can get hurt, right? You also have an impaired self-awareness. That frontal lobe shuts down. We're not self-critical anymore. We don't have that self-awareness that we usually do in a normal state that kind of protects us in many ways from doing crazy things. That kind of goes away. So we lose ourselves. We are not as emotional or as behaviorally flexible. We can be addictive. Risk-taking goes up. These are all dark, like maladaptive things that can happen in a flow state. The point of all of that is, and one of my mentors in flow training, he actually wrote his doctoral thesis on the dark side of flow. And spoiler alert, the cure for the dark side of flow is mindfulness. Okay, so being able to recognize when I'm going to go take a bigger risk than maybe I should. Okay, kind of bringing yourself back. And some can argue that mindfulness can take you out of a flow state, but that's not true. There may be a little bit of a dialing back, just a tad, but you can still be in a flow state and be mindful. And it's really important to mitigate this dark side of flow. So how do we do it? Well, there are basically 3 types of mindfulness practice. One is focused awareness. And this is like focusing on your breath. This is the basic form of meditation that everybody kind of starts out with, is like focus your attention on something, usually the breath. And then as your mind drifts, you come back to it. You refocus your attention. That is literally the practice. That's it. I think it was Sam Harris that said that explaining meditation is incredibly simple, but the practice itself is not easy. And if you've ever tried it before, it's true. Like that mind starts to go and you want to follow those thoughts, but the practice is, nope, let it go, refocus the attention. Every time you refocus your attention, that is a repetition. And the whole point of mindfulness practice, like a meditation like that, with focused awareness, is the refocusing of attention, getting better at it, getting quicker, not letting the mind wander so much, getting back. That's the entire practice. So this can be done in a million different ways, and it does not require you to just sit on a cushion, right, with your hands out like a Tibetan monk. You can do this anywhere. You can do this while you're doing the dishes, right? You can focus on a sensation. If we're thinking of interoception, let's say I'm focusing on the sensation of my feet on the floor. Okay, that's my focused attention. I'm doing dishes, my mind's gonna wander. Okay, now I'm thinking about this soap on my hands. Nope, refocus, feet on the floor. Okay, again, focused attention or focused awareness, that is the entire practice. You can do it anytime, anywhere. The more often we do it, the more that practice becomes a state of mindfulness. The more we're in a state of mindfulness, the more it becomes a trait. We just have this trait where we are innately, mindful. Open awareness is a different kind. This is where we are essentially letting anything and everything come into our awareness and just monitoring it. You can label it, you don't have to, but you can see it in your mind's eye, right? The thoughts that come up, the feelings, the sensations. label it or not, then you just let them go, let it pass. And the next thing comes in, and you'll notice there's a lot of thoughts coming in all the time, right? And it can feel like when you start to do this one, it can feel like just a madhouse of crazy random things coming up, and you want to chase them. And this is the key. Again, this practice is more about not focusing attention and just letting anything come in and letting it go. This is like sometimes described as like, clouds passing through your consciousness. You can see the cloud and then just let it pass. Or ripples in a stream, right? The water is constantly flowing and you can't stop the water, which in this case is like the thoughts that are coming into your awareness. You can't stop them, you just have to let it flow. Just let it go. The last type of mindfulness practice is called kind attention. Shoot, I just blanked on there's a much more common term called like heartfelt compassion or compassion meditation. That's kind of what this is, but it's directing your attention at yourself or at others with compassion. Okay. It's really powerful if you direct your compassion towards something that you are normally not very compassionate about. That's a really powerful practice. I probably wouldn't start there. I would definitely start with yourself, but that's also very difficult for a lot of people. We can be very critical of ourselves. So what can be helpful to start with this kindness and compassion meditation or mindfulness practice is directing it as something you just already love and you're super compassionate about. Could be your pet, right? Just think about how much you love them, how much compassion you can send to that being, right? And you'll feel that warm, fuzzy feelings come up. But then try to take that attention towards yourself or towards others that you already are compassionate about. But expert level is it taking that attention and compassion to something that you really don't like. Yeah, Julie.
Can we just clarify? For whatever reason, I'm getting stuck when I think of compassion. I'm getting stuck on either love or pity. And can you say a few more things about kind of what's in the middle there?
It's definitely not pity.
Yeah.
Because pity infers like an elevation of yourself over others.
Right. Yeah.
And that's not what we're looking for. We're really looking for compassion in more of a form of like empathy.
Okay.
Love is a great word, but it's such a
so many definitions.
Yeah, it's almost too many. It's the great word, it's the perfect word, but it's not clear enough, which is why compassion is usually used. But compassion in this sense is the removal of the self from it and the directed attention with just empathy is really the best word, or it could be sympathy. Never been through what they're going through, but it's that heartfelt I don't have a better way to describe it.
Yeah. So now, but that's really helpful because now what comes to me is a sense of is sort of the question of observing what are they feeling? What must they be feeling in this moment?
Yeah,
and
it can be
sort of letting the question sit and observe.
And it doesn't even have to be that involved.
Okay.
Like oftentimes if you listen to a guided kindness and compassion meditation, it's going to be so simple as like just think of a person and just send them like this healing like white light.
Oh, interesting.
You just want to like feel some love and compassion and just send it to them that way. right? And whether you believe in the quantum field and the energies of people and all of this stuff, it doesn't matter, because the practice is just like picturing another being and feeling compassion for them. That's the whole practice, and it changes your brain in really cool ways when you do this practice. Like the areas of your brain, which we're gonna get to this. Let me turn this back on, because this is where the gratitude kind of comes in. Okay, I'm gonna get back to it because I just want to finish the meditation part. And this is basically it. How much do you need? 11 minutes per day. You don't need pasta with it. I don't know why that picture is right there. I obviously did not update that picture.
Compassion as pesto. It's funny.
But 11 minutes per day has been like the kind of the standard as far as all the meditation that's been studied. It seems to be about 11 minutes per day of mindfulness practice. It doesn't have to be all at once. It could be the 5 minutes that you're washing dishes. It can be the 30 seconds while you tie your shoes. It can be a dedicated meditation practice. Maybe when you're in the sauna, anytime. You can get that 11 minutes per day. You're going to start to see the changes in your brain in around 8 weeks. Like, there are physical changes in the brain that happen. And this is where we get into, it also happens with gratitude. And this is the only way that we know really to actually expand happiness. And what I mean by that is actually raise the baseline level of happiness that we experience in our life. Gratitude is the best way to do that. What is gratitude? Well, it is the quality of being thankful. Also, it's the readiness to show appreciation for and to return kindness. Okay, so again, gratitude, the happiness expander, starts out as a practice, and then it kind of becomes a skill where we are more appreciative and we're showing gratitude. And then once you've gotten past that point and we've kind of ingrained it a little bit, it becomes a personality trait where we are just a thankful person full of gratitude. When you get to that point in your brain, it literally becomes a filtering mechanism. So you start to filter out negative things and you start to see the positive more often. You start to seek out things that you're grateful for, right? And it makes sense. If you start like writing down the things you're grateful for every night, over time, like during the day, your brain is going to be seeking out like, oh, I'm going to have to write down 3 things I'm grateful for. It's like, what can I find in my environment as I go through my day that I can write down later? That's how it becomes a filtering mechanism. And why it's really powerful is because it can mitigate what's called hedonic adaptation. Okay. And I threw this slide in there from the FRC about the hedonic treadmill. And this graph was in Psychology Today, like years ago, 84. But you can kind of see how you got level of happiness and time over here. So a positive event, we get this huge spike in good feelings and happiness, right? But then we return back to normal. We have another positive event, and we return back to normal. Even a negative event is going to lower our happiness, but we're going to come back to this base level every time. Okay, that's the hedonic treadmill. Good things happen, we come back to baseline. Bad things happen, we come back to baseline. So what we want to avoid, though, is this hedonic adaptation, which, okay, here's an example of it. They did this study on lottery winners and paraplegics. Okay, and they followed them after they had won the lottery on this side and after they had had an accident that left them paralyzed. And as you would imagine, like the lottery winners had this huge spike in happiness initially. But over time, they returned back to that baseline that they were at before. Winning the lottery did not make them more happy overall in their life. On the other side, the paraplegics had this accident, and rightfully so, had a huge dip in happiness. But they also rebounded back and came back to basically the same level of happiness. So either way, we always return back to that baseline. Okay, now hedonic adaptation, the tricky thing here is that when we tend to have like a lot of good things that happen in our life, we become adapted to those good things happening. And so that baseline doesn't ever go up or down. We just get used to the good things happening. All right. Now this is really dangerous because this is how, married couples fall apart after 20 years because they eventually get so used to all the great things that they were attracted to in the first place, and they start taking each other for granted, right? And they forget how good they actually have it. This is like a key problem in our Western culture. We have it so good right now that we have to seek out the most ridiculous things to get pissed off about because our baseline of happiness has not improved, right? And we've become adapted to all the really positive, good things that we have. So how do we stop that from happening? Well, gratitude is the answer. Because if we get used to the things that happen to us, good or bad, then in order to raise that baseline level, we need to start seeking out more ways to increase the baseline level, and that's the filtering mechanism of looking for the good things in life. Simply put, okay? Now, like what actually happens when you start practicing gratitude? Well, it lights up the reward pathway in your brain. You get dopamine, you get all these good neurochemicals. It lessens anxiety and depression. It shifts your heart rhythm, right? Slows it down usually a little bit. Increases heart rate variability, which is a key indicator of readiness for training or exercise, of your stress response and resilience. Improves your physical health, increases social connection. Empathy and compassion, that's a big one, and increases resilience. So going back to the empathy and compassion, oh, I think I left that slide out of there, dang it. Okay, but back to the empathy and compassion that we were talking about earlier with Julie. The area of your brain, it's in the front part of your brain, it's called the ventral medial prefrontal cortex. This area of your brain is really important in learning, right? And it shows a huge amount of increase in activity when we're being more mindful and grateful. The other area regarding empathy and compassion is called the tempoparietal junction, which is also kind of part of the frontal lobe. This shows a huge increase in activity when we're being grateful and mindful. And this is an area where our empathy and compassion for others lives. So it does actually changes your brain when you start practicing gratitude and mindfulness. Okay. How do you do it? This is Harvard's Harvard Medical School came up with like this gratitude protocol. Daily gratitude journaling, writing a letter, counting your gratitude, praying, and just thanking the subject of your gratitude. Like if you feel thankful for somebody, telling them, right? And there's a great quote from William Arthur Ward here. Feeling gratitude and not sharing it is like wrapping a present and not giving it. Like what a waste, right? What a waste for you to not share that. Because in the act of sharing it, not only are you increasing the happiness and of your other person, the subject, but you're also increasing it more for yourself when you actually share that with someone else. Okay, so that's how you do it, but how much do you need? Well, daily gratitude journal, that's easy. It's daily, right? You could do it in the morning or in the evening. I like to do it in the evening. And what you want to remember is it's all in the feeling. You got to feel it in order to, one of the sayings is you got to feel it in order to move it. You got to feel it in order to change it. This only works if you actually tap into the feeling of gratitude. It's the feeling of gratitude that gets integrated into your brain. Okay. So it can be 3 things, it can be 10 things. Doesn't matter. As long as you get one that you really feel. That's like the practice. You can also write a gratitude letter once a month. These are incredible. Okay. You can write it to yourself, you can write it to another person. Doesn't really matter. But if you write it to another person, that's incredibly powerful for social connection, right? For building relationships. And the best thing you can do, you can send it to them. That's totally fine. But if you can read it to them in person, you're going to create a massive bond and a massive amount of change in their brain as well as your own. Counting gratitude, do it anytime. If you're feeling shitty, write down 25 things that you're grateful for. You can't feel terrible and feel grateful at the same time. It doesn't work, right? Pray. You can pray anytime. A good prayer practice, and this doesn't mean pray to some monotheistic God. You can pray to Mother Earth. You can pray to Zorbot, Beelzebrox. Can't remember his name from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But it doesn't matter.
Zaphod.
Thank you. Zaphod. What's his last name?
Beeblebrox.
Beelzebrox. Thank you.
Good, we definitely need the last name because,
Yes.
otherwise, how are we?
Right.
That's great.
But the point is, you can pray to anything. It doesn't matter. It's just the act of praying and being thankful to something greater than yourself. Very powerful. Okay. And then thanking the subject of your gratitude anytime it comes up, all the time. If the barista put a little extra whip on your coffee this morning, thank them. I'm grateful for you. Thank you. You're the best. More frequency equals faster increases in the happiness baseline. That's the thing here. Patterns, right? The more we give it the input that we want to change the output, the faster it's going to happen. The nervous system adapts pretty fast. So get that frequency in. All right, now, I didn't leave a lot of time for myself, but social support is the most overlooked and underappreciated non-negotiable for flow. Okay. It's the safety net of peak performance. Social support allows us to get outside of our comfort zone and to take some risks. That's where flow happens. Okay. And without the social support, we're not going to do it if we don't feel supported if we fail. Because when we fail, if we also are ostracized from the group, that means death. Literally. I'm not even being hyperbolic here. Social isolation is the fastest way to die. Okay. And it really is toxic. So why social support? Because peak performance by its nature is generally kind of a selfish thing. We're all trying to like reach this like self-actualization for ourselves, which is a positive, right, thing to chase. It is, it's good. But when we prioritize that over anything else, then we start to isolate ourselves. We start to disregard relationships, all for the sake of making myself the best version of myself. Then it can kind of become a negative thing in some ways. So being aware that that peak performance chase can be a little selfish is a big reason why we need social support. But the biggest reason is because social isolation is toxic and we are social beings as human beings. Okay. Well, what was this guy's name? It's John Capiocco. He's a researcher. Can't remember from where, but he studies social isolation, and he estimates that 20% of people anywhere and everywhere are unhappy due to social isolation. In their studies, they found that cancer grows faster when we're socially isolated. All the risk factors for metabolic diseases are actually on par when we are isolated with smoking and obesity. Social isolation is as risky as smoking and being fat, right? That's crazy.
I had to unmute just to say what like that. That's wild.
I know, it's nuts. But this is how important it is for our physical health, not even just our mental health, but our physical health degrades when we are isolated. And I mean, this hits home for me and my brother here, because our grandmother was the most social person in the world. And as soon as COVID locked her down, she declined very rapidly and she didn't make it very long. And it's so apparent to us what that turning point was. She was no longer able to see her family, who she would see every day. She was the most social person that I knew. And that really, it was very sad to watch that happen. So the other thing that happens here that makes this social isolation toxic is our brains actually drop in activation in the areas associated with empathy, just like we talked about, the tempoparietal junction, and learning. When they showed people that were socially isolated versus people that were very socially connected, pictures of faces of people that were like hurting, the people in social isolation did not have as much activation in this area of the brain where we have empathy. The people who were very well connected had lots of activation. Same thing when they saw pictures of people that were very happy and having a great time. The people that were isolated didn't care. They got no activation there, right? And they actually, when they asked these people in social isolation to remember good times with other people, they actually literally felt colder in the room than the people who were very well connected socially. So it actually gives you, what we might call like social chills, right? Actually feel colder. It affects our physiology. So human beings are social animals. From evolution onward, forever, we have been built for social connection, and that shows up in our brains. The bigger the brains of the animal, the more social they are. Our brains are literally built for social connection. These areas of the frontal lobe, a lot of them are built for social connection. And researchers say that social intelligence actually has its own neural circuitry in your brain. This DMN, that's called the default mode network. When we're like just chilling, our default mode network takes over. And this is where a lot of rumination happens, right? And it's not a bad thing. This is like our daydreaming network. This is our just chilling and relaxing network. This mode of brain activity is built for processing social information. Most of the time, if you're not engaged in a task and you're just chilling, you're thinking about other people or your relationship to other people or social situations, right? This default mode network is literally built for processing social information. So anytime we're not like doing a thing, we're thinking about ourselves in relation to others or others in relation to others or ourselves. So this is really key. And in the sense that like it is so important to have social connection. Now, how much do we need? Like, do we need, one more point about attitudinal contagion and what that is. Attitudinal contagion is the thought that, or the concept that we soak up the beliefs, the mental models, the ways that to think about the world from the people that we surround ourselves with. And I loved the term belief vampires, because that's what it is. We're wired to take on the beliefs of those near us because it's helpful for the survival of the tribe. We need to be on the same page. Otherwise, we're going to splinter, right? So it's like osmosis. And those sayings that you hear all the time from self-help gurus and otherwise about like proximity is power, that's a real thing. And you really should surround yourself in physical scenarios. Like, I want my body close to people who expand my beliefs and expand my consciousness. Literal proximity, like going back to the energy conversation. We need those people around us, which is hard in this digital age where we tend to like be more socially isolated. We got to get out there, right? And you really do become the 5 people you spend the most time with. Is it actually 5 or is it 10? Or forget about the number, it doesn't really matter that much. But take the people that you spend the most time with and ask yourself, right, are they positive in their contagion, right? Am I catching positive vibes from them, or are they negative? Are they mostly fixed mindsets? Are they limited beliefs, very narrow in their thinking? And is that having an effect on me? Because I guarantee you, either way, it is. Okay, so how do we find more social support? Well, neuro drills for frontal lobe activation. We talked about a couple frontal lobe areas that are incredibly important for social connection. And if our frontal lobe is not working correctly, we do not get to connect as well as we could, right? And here's an example. If you've ever met somebody who has this like flat affect where their face just doesn't move, they show no emotion at all, they're like a robot, that's a frontal lobe problem. Okay, their frontal lobe is not activating, which is then not having like these responses through the facial muscles to emotion, right? They're just flat, chill. So that's just one example of why the frontal lobe is so important with social connection, because if we're not having that, we can't have the back and forth. You can't read the micro expressions that are happening on my face and picking up all the nonverbal cues. So the connection is going to be strained. So we can do neuro drills to help with frontal lobe activation. Like say you're going into a party as an introvert and you don't have a lot of frontal lobe activation, your survival brain is going to be like, no, I'm not going in there, right? That's scary. I don't like it, blah, blah, blah. If we can tune that down, turn up the frontal lobe, you're going to be more engaged. You're going to have a better time connecting with people. Okay. The other things you need to do is ensure your belonging needs are met and your attitudinal contagion is positive. So first of all, for the frontal lobe activation, we've talked about most of these before. Stroop test, okay, with the colors and words. Great frontal lobe activation. The coordination chart, slapping the hands. Great frontal lobe activation and connecting the whole brain. The other 2 we haven't really done are isometrics. Isometrics are run by the frontal lobe. Okay, we got to create neural drive to hold an isometric contraction. Big frontal lobe activator. The other one is gaze stabilization, and that's kind of like isometrics for your eyes. Okay, we can do it in 9 different directions, starting with neutral, up, out, and then all the way around the compass. You want to test some directions and find one that gives you a really positive reassessment. You might hold it for 5 seconds, you might hold it for 20. Might be 30, that's fine. We want to get all of them to at least 20 seconds, but that's, you know, that's part of your neuro training kind of protocol. But just for this, for driving some frontal lobe activation, find one that's a high payoff. And you can use it at any time. It's a really easy one to use when you're actually in the scenario, right? It's just kind of set your gaze to drive some frontal lobe activation, or in the bathroom. That's also great. So neuro drills are great. Now, how much do you need as far as connection? This is tough because everyone is different. Introverts on one end may need much less actual social connection because it's kind of draining for them, energy-wise. Extroverts may need more, and it's very energizing, so they seek it out, right? So everybody's going to be a little bit different. But I put a kind of prescription down at the bottom to start with. So basically the two big things you need to be doing for creating a sense of belonging, which is incredibly important. And this is key in that we don't just need connection. Connection's fine. Like you have connections with your coworkers, you have connections with distant, with acquaintances and stuff like that. Those are fine. But we need more than that. We need a sense of belonging. We need a place where we can go where we are part of a group, where we don't just know everybody ourselves, but they know each other. And we are all like, we have something that holds us together. Okay. Like fraternal organizations that men go to, right? These are huge because men are not great historically at seeking out that kind of connection. Women tend to do a better job at it, just kind of naturally how they're built. They're built more for seeking out that social connection. But anyway, that's just one example. Sports teams, great for a sense of belonging. Just a good core friend group, awesome. But we need that somewhere. And you need 30 minutes to start. 30 minutes in any kind of group that gives you a feeling of belonging. Okay, really important to get that each week. And then the other one is just having one, even just one to start. One meaningful conversation with a close friend or a family member where you guys get each other and you can actually find some flow. Like this is what I would love for you, is to find flow in a conversation with a close friend or family member. It could be a coworker too, if you guys are really on the same page and you get each other, right? And you can feel that connection happening. This is usually more than like a 5-minute conversation though. It's usually like 15, 20 minutes. You'll know because you'll feel better after the conversation. Your nervous system will literally kind of get in tune with theirs and it will chill out and you'll feel better. Same thing with the social group. Like you'll get in there, you may resist it, but you'll get in there and you go do it because you know when you leave, you're gonna feel better. Physically, you feel better, okay? So more belonging and ensuring that the people that you surround yourself with are imparting like positive vibes onto you. You got to make sure that the people you hang out with are expanding your beliefs and not contracting them. And it's okay to ditch friends that are not expanding your beliefs. You can spend less time with them physically and still be loyal to them. You can still help them. You can still be an awesome friend, but you can also set boundaries and limit yourself. And the best thing you can do if you do have friends like that is tell them exactly why you're not going to spend time with them. Like, it's a hard thing to do. It's a hard conversation, but that could be the best thing for them, right? To expand their own belief and kind of raise them up to your level and beyond. But you got to hang out with people that are expanding your belief. They got to be, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room, right? We've all heard that. You need to get with people that are going to push you. Okay. So we went a little bit over budget on our time today, but I think we got most everything in there. You got to start a gratitude practice and a mindfulness practice if you're not already doing it. 11 minutes a day of mindfulness and any type of gratitude practice. I really like the gratitude journal. Write down a few things each night. Feel it. It takes less than 5 minutes. Okay. But just having the practices in place are important. Okay. Any questions?